Welcome, friends, to a gathering place for the curious and the brave. Do you ever feel a shiver run down your spine on a perfectly ordinary day? Does the rustle of leaves in the wind sometimes whisper secrets in your ear? We delve into the realm of the unexplained. These are true stories, whispered through generations, passed down from campfire to campfire, each one abrush with the unseen. So settle in, adjust the lights, and prepare to be chilled. Tonight, we share true scary stories. This happened a long time ago, roughly 22 or 23 years ago, I believe. I recently discovered a bunch of message boards where I enjoyed reading about other people's creepy experiences, so I decided to share one of my own. I was a single man at the time this happened, and loved going on long drives roughly once a month or so. It was mid-autumn, and I decided to go for a drive after work. I headed to a spot I liked a lot at the time. I worked a job that allowed me to finish early on Fridays if I made up enough hours throughout the week. Well, usually I would have finished earlier, but there was a deadline I needed to work, so I had to stay a bit later than expected. I'm quite a stubborn person. I was looking forward to my monthly drive, so I was going to go on it no matter what. Just because I was heading off a little bit later than expected didn't mean that it wouldn't be fun. My destination was a convenience store about 2.5 hours away. The roads were nice and quiet, and there were some long winding roads and highways which allowed me to really build up some speed. I arrived at the convenience store and parked in one of the corner spots. That store was a little unusual because it had a large number of parking bays. I think the convenience store owner had bought the piece of land it sits on, and previously it belonged to a hotel or something like that. As a result, there were way more parking spots than necessary. That's my guess anyway. I liked using that store as my marker to turn around and head back. I would park, grab a drink and some snacks, and maybe even take a quick nap as well. Since it was autumn and was at a much later hour this time around, I thought I would just take a nap until the sun came up. I kept a sleeping bag in my car for situations just like this. I locked my doors and my windows. I was a lot more tired than I thought it would be, so it didn't take me long to pass off to sleep. I reclined my seat and drifted off into a dreamless rest. I remember that I was suddenly jolted awake when I felt a pair of hands grab me from behind and attempt to pull me backward. I immediately thought this couldn't be possible. I'd locked the doors, and I was alone in the car. What the hell was happening? I was in a state of absolute confusion and shock. In the chaos of me trying to cling to the steering wheel and whoever was behind me trying to pull me backward, I heard something that still gives me chills to this day. It's been 23 years now, and I still remember this exact moment clear as day. As I was pulled back further, I heard a woman begin laughing hysterically. That was despite me having been alone in the car previously. The laughter slowly decreased in volume until it completely faded away. The grip on me released, and I tugged myself forward. I looked over in my rearview mirror, and I didn't see anyone behind me. Somehow I knew that I wouldn't. I got out of the car in a panic and stood by the side of it, taking deep breaths. I was shaking with fear. I had no explanation for what the hell just happened. I had a flashlight in my car, so I grabbed that. I wanted to have some light to accompany me. I was frantically shining it around the parking lot, hoping to see something, some sense of something normal, to take my mind off what just happened. My flashlight fell on an old, tattered poster, which had been tied to the chain-link fence. It read something like, "Information needed. Body of foreign national woman found inside suitcase. Suspect and victim unidentified." My heart sank. I thought the hands I felt and the laughter I heard must have belonged to the ghost of the woman. If it was her, it was an unfortunate final resting place. I know how crazy I must sound by saying that. It was a really scary as hell experience, and I was a real nervous wreck. I almost didn't want to get back in my car. I also didn't want to get back on the road either, because I was so tired. I really regretted going on a drive so late at night. I was so annoyed with myself. I went over to the convenience store and bought a bottle of tea. I went into the bathroom to calm myself down for a while, and then walked back out to my car. I had little idea of what to do now. I didn't want to die by a ghost, but I also didn't want to die driving while tired. I did the following. I poured a little of my tea out by the car and also poured some into the cap and left it nearby. I said a prayer and asked if they could please allow me to sleep a little while longer. I climbed into my vehicle and tried to get some more rest. Amazingly, I fell asleep without much issue, and I didn't wake up again until morning came. I had mixed feelings about that night. It was scary, but it truly was a very unique and memorable experience. This happened when I finished work early one afternoon. I had the sudden urge to go for a long drive, so I went home and quickly got ready to head out. I left home by the evening. Didn't really have a destination in mind. I just hopped onto the highway and picked some random streets and roads to turn off on. I remember turning off the satellite navigation as well. I don't know what really got into me that day. I just kinda felt like disappearing. I wanted to get away from everything and go someplace new. It was a really fun and spontaneous drive. I stopped off at random restaurants along my travels, had some udon noodles that were really fantastic as well. As I moved away from the cities and towns, I saw more of the countryside, which was great to see. I saw some wild vegetables growing and stopped to look at them. They looked pretty tasty to me. I drove for a good long while, almost through 2 prefectures entirely. That was when my sense of adventure slowly waned. I checked my dashboard clock and saw it was coming up on 1 a.m. or so. To be honest, it was much later than I expected it to be. I found a roadside station along the national highway and decided to pull in and sleep in my car for a few hours. I had planned on sleeping in the car that night anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. I'd even prepared to use the roadside station's bathroom to brush my teeth. I pulled the sun visors down on the windshield and used a piece of cardboard I kept in the car to block out the street light. I wedged it under the sun visors and pretty much covered up the windshield entirely. It wasn't the brightest light, but the main idea with the cardboard was to stop people from looking in at me. I managed to block everything but the rear seat window behind me. I had an idea to cover that window, though. I hung my jacket on the little hanger thing on the door and thought that would be enough to put people off from looking in on me. With everything in place and total privacy, I got ready to go to sleep. I think that because of the mood I was in, I found it really difficult to get any rest that night. I couldn't shake the lingering sense of adventure I had in me. I was completely restless. I decided to search for local restaurants and sightseeing spots as well. I was already excited to see what I could find on my spontaneous travel. That was when I heard my jacket begin to slip off the hanger it was on. It was a pretty heavy jacket, so it made a lot of noise as it slipped down. I spun around to look as it was falling and received the shock of my life. As I turned around, I locked eyes with a complete stranger staring at me. It was a man. He was giving me this emotionless, cold glare. It really shocked me to see him staring like that. It was frightening as well. I paused for a moment, staring back at this guy's pale white face. What I saw made me unable to believe what was happening. I got my smartphone out because something was wrong with this guy's face. It looked like it was kind of pulsating or morphing in shape somehow. It's hard to explain. I turned on my smartphone's flashlight and lit up the dark car. I then aimed the direction at the back window where the man had been just moments prior. The face that had been staring at me had already disappeared. I sat there for a couple of seconds in complete shock. Then I unlocked my door. I don't know if this was the best decision I ever made, but I did it nonetheless. I stepped out and looked all around. I shined the light in all directions, but I could not find the owner of that pale face I saw peering in at me. There was no one there. I asked myself who that could have been and what could have possibly happened to them. I couldn't answer that question. Though I've never been a believer in the paranormal, that is something that really made me consider alternative possibilities. To this day, I have no explanation for what I saw, nor for what was wrong with the man's face. I drove to another lot immediately after that. There was no chance I was going to fall asleep again there in that parking lot. So, my hobby is sleeping in my car. I like to do it on days before public holidays, since I don't want people to see me. Usually if I do, they report me to the police, and the police inform me that I need to move. If it's not the police, then it's the youngsters. They peer into my car windows. It makes choosing a perfect spot all that much more difficult. It was around summer of last year. It was late at night and I was driving around, trying to find a decent place to sleep at. I was on a mountain road when I saw a turn for what looked like a disused building. There was an old rusty sign that said this used to be an observatory of some sort. I saw one other truck in the car park of this place. Figured that whoever it was must be taking a rest too. I pulled in. Perfect. There was another truck in the car park too. I parked away from the truck in the middle of the car park and pulled out my phone. I played with it until I became sleepy. I then put the seat all the way back and pulled my blanket over me and fell asleep. I woke up sometime during the night. My throat was so dry, I went to grab a drink from my bag, and just as I did that, I heard a small stone or something like that strike the back of my car on the rear windshield. I looked at my rear view mirror. There didn't appear to be anything out there. I simply took a drink and went back to sleeping. The second time I woke up was because I really needed to use the restroom. I looked at my phone. 4:27 a.m. I got out of the car and kind of hoped the abandoned observatory might have a toilet. I didn't want to climb over a fence and wander around in the middle of the night in there, though. I found a spot out of the way and relieved myself. As I was doing so, I heard one of the truck doors open and shut. Someone else was awake. As I came back to my car, I saw a man just standing there. He looked to be about my age, wearing glasses. "You couldn't sleep either, huh? Scared of something?" I looked at him a bit puzzled and asked him what he meant. "Huh? You didn't notice?" I was a bit spooked by his response. He began to elaborate. He said that he had been watching a DVD when I pulled into the parking area. He thought it was a bit odd since only truckers exclusively use this place to park and take a rest on particularly long drives. As his DVD finished up, he just so happened to look up and saw a woman standing on the front of my car with her hands on the hood. He said that seeing this really freaked him out. He took his eyes off the woman for just a second, and when he looked back, she was at my driver's side window, trying to open the door. He said that when she noticed him looking her way, she ducked down by the side of my car. He kept checking on me for a while to make sure she wasn't doing anything suspicious, but he didn't see the woman anymore. He then went to sleep in the back of his truck. After checking, all his doors were locked. I thought he was just trying to freak me out, so I questioned him. He said that if I didn't believe him, then I should check the outside of my car for handprints, as she had her hands cupped up against it and against the glass when she came by the side of my car. He came with me. The window didn't appear to have any handprints on it, so I thought this might be the kind of thing truckers did to make sure us non-truckers didn't use their parking spots or something. As I went to check the hood, though, I noticed there was a small pair of indentations on it. I was pissed. I heard the trucker shout, "Hey, there's something worse around here, buddy." There were scratches and indentations, as if something had been striking at the door. I heard the door of another truck open and close, and another older man came over. He said he had seen the same woman before, that she'd done the same thing to him on many a night. I thought she was just after some company, but she never said a word. She just stared. I asked a local about her in a bar down that road. Turns out apparently she did that all the time. They said it was fine though. She wouldn't try to hurt you at least. I looked at the other truck driver in shock. I hightailed it out of there. I couldn't handle it. Knowing how dark and isolated we were in that location was enough for me. Someone arriving on foot in the middle of nowhere in the dead of night just to mess with people? No, not dealing with that. I had to go. I had a very creepy experience a couple of years ago. I'm an avid reader and have completed many a book series since I was a kid. Reading has always been one of my favorite hobbies, so I go to my local library all the time, especially to get some more books. There's one very close to where I live. I remember I went there one time trying to find some new books to read. I was interested in branching out the types of genres that I was used to reading. This time, I spent a lot more time there than usual. When I was there, I remember things started out average, then quieted down. It was around 6 p.m., and the library closed at 7. I was near a random bookshelf in a very quiet area. As I stood in the aisle all by myself, I found some books I was interested in. I picked one up and wanted to read a little bit to get a feel for the story. I was reading it for maybe 5 minutes or so. Everybody knows how libraries are extremely quiet, and this one was especially so. It was getting really close to closing time. I was lost in all my reading, when all of a sudden I heard what sounded like a whisper from behind me. Somebody leaned into my ear. "Hey!" I turned around, but I didn't see anyone there. It seemed like the sound must have been coming from the next aisle over. Maybe they weren't talking to me specifically. Whoever it was, I decided to pay it no mind. I went back to the book, and about a minute went by. Then I heard it again, this time a little louder. It sounded like a man's voice. "Hey! Hey you!" I turned around again. This time I thought I could see someone moving around in the aisle next to me. I couldn't see much though, because of all the books on the shelves. The only things I could see were between the empty gaps. I decided to go over there and see what was going on. I walked past to the other side, but no one was there. They must have moved out of the way to another aisle. I walked past a few more aisles, and a man was in one of them. It could possibly have been the whisperer, but he wasn't looking in my direction and didn't seem to be paying any attention to me. I didn't want to ask him directly, so I turned around and walked to where I had been before. I decided to just leave, because whoever was doing this whispering and hiding game was really creeping me out now. I got the books that I wanted to check out and then did so. I left. After I left, I drove home and arrived back safe and sound. Just minutes later, not long after getting inside my apartment, my cell phone suddenly started to ring. I didn't recognize the number. I picked it up and answered, wondering who it could possibly be. What I heard on the other end was the same whispering I had heard at the library. Somebody was saying hey to me, just like before. It was the same man's voice. I asked multiple times who this was and asked them how they got my number, why they were calling me. None of my questions were answered though. After maybe 10 seconds of whispering, followed by 10 seconds or so of silence, the person on the other end hung up on me. I blocked the number after that and didn't go back to that particular library for several months. I only went back there during that time to return books. Luckily, I never got another strange call or had another eerie encounter like that. I've been back to that library since then, and everything's been perfectly fine. I still wonder who that was and how they got my number. I'm a single woman, and I live alone in the city. I work as a salesperson. Due to the nature of my job, I work what some would consider to be antisocial hours. I don't really mind the hours myself, to be honest. That's not why I'm here. I just want to share my experience. I usually stay up late on Sunday nights because of this, and sleep in on Monday mornings. I like having my working life be like that, in all honesty. There are a lot of people living in my building, and a lot of them look like they're office workers and salespeople just like me. I think that they work more normal hours though, because Sunday nights are always really quiet around here. Well, it always used to be, but recently I've been hearing some strange noises. What sounds like someone on my floor wandering around. At about 3 a.m., I remember hearing this strange scraping sound, accompanying heavy dragging footsteps. I hear these noises coming from the communal hallway, which passes by my apartment. I've been thinking of moving out, I can't lie. I don't know. Maybe you'll agree with me that it's for the best by the time you hear the end of this. I think that the floor plan of each apartment in my building is the exact same as mine, so everyone should have their back bathroom next to the entrance, then a small window at the front of each apartment. As you can imagine, I'm a night owl, so when I would hear noises out there, I would easily wonder, who is this, a newspaper delivery man? I thought that must be it, because who else would be coming to the building that early to walk through the communal corridors? After I thought about it a bit more though, that didn't make much sense. Newspapers get delivered a little bit later in the morning, not at 3 a.m. It just didn't seem feasible. Then I wondered if maybe someone was doing some early morning workouts. That couldn't be it either though. That scraping sound, what would they have been doing? And the long, slow footsteps didn't seem like someone who was working out either. Maybe some kind of rehabilitation training? It could be that, I thought to myself. Eventually I managed to convince myself that this strange noise I was hearing was some person doing rehabilitation training. I still thought of it every now and then though, and wondered why it always had to be at 3 o'clock in the morning. I had Mondays off work obviously, which is why I stayed up especially late on Sundays. Twice a month I also didn't work on Thursdays. I didn't usually stay up late on those nights though. I wondered if perhaps the same noises could be heard on Wednesday nights. I stayed up on one Wednesday to try and find out. Lo and behold, I heard it yet again. What was strange about it though was the manner of movement had changed. It made me feel uncomfortable. Now my rehabilitation training theory didn't make sense either. They were dragging their feet at a speed much faster, these little bursts of speed. I started to get a bit scared. We did have a prowler in our area, so I wondered if someone was coming here to scope out the place. Needless to say, I didn't really feel good when I started hearing these noises right outside my door. I went to make sure my door was locked because I was feeling so nervous. The dragging and scraping went down the hall to the end of my floor. I knew they'd have to go past my door again. They wouldn't be able to leave the building otherwise because the stairs and elevator were there. The footsteps headed toward the deepest part of our floor, the apartment at the end of the hall. I thought that apartment must belong to this late-night wanderer. It wasn't until later, though, that something dawned on me. The apartment at the end of the hall was vacant, and it had been vacant for some months now. No one was supposed to live there. I have no idea what could possibly be going on. I can't get any sleep at night. I've been looking for a new place to live recently. I'll take pretty much any place I can get at this stage, and I'll tell you why. Ever since the night I heard those steps on my floor, I've heard them going back and forth outside my door every night, before eventually heading down the hall. I have no idea why they've recently started targeting my apartment in particular, but I know I've got to get out of here before something happens to me. This happened about 10 years ago. My husband and I were really into overnight trips up and down the country. Back then, we lived quite a carefree lifestyle, and I miss those nights somewhat. Not the night I'm about to talk to you about, though. We usually drove back late at night after a trip. We liked it that way, as the roads were more clear, and the night was cool and calm along the way. Eventually, though, my husband and I both needed to use the restroom, so we decided to pull into a roadside station. I think it was about 2 or 3 a.m. or so. We were in a prefecture famous for being called the Sea of Trees. It had a lot of nature and was a really beautiful place during the day, but during the night it felt really wild. The roadside station we stopped at was very close to the Misaka Pass. There's a lot of nature in that area as well, very green. The pass itself is surrounded by a forest. Because it was the middle of the night, naturally the station was closed, and there wasn't much light in the area either. We pulled into the quiet parking area, and my husband and I trotted off toward the bathrooms. There was a separate building located a little away from the stores they had there, for the bathrooms. There was a light on there, but like I said before, it was a very dim light. Honestly, more than anything, it made the area look kind of gloomy. I could see some brighter light leaking out of the building, but for some reason that night, I hesitated. I suddenly got the feeling I didn't want to go inside. I didn't know why I felt like that at the time, but I guess I do now. I didn't know when I would get the next chance to use the restroom, and we were a long way away from home. It's not like I really had a choice. My husband walked off into the men's side, and I headed into the ladies'. It was very clean in there. As I was gazing around, I noticed that the ceiling between the two was joined. Moreover, there was a little gap, allowing sound to travel. That actually gave me a sense of security, knowing I was in a space kind of connected to the one my husband was in. I still didn't like being in here, though. That strange sense of apprehension did not go away. The building had lots of glass in its design, and the roof was kind of cylindrical. In a sense, it kind of looked like a mirror on its side. It's really hard to explain. The structure was a bit, intimidating. I wanted to get in there and get out as quickly as possible. There was just this weird energy about this place. All the doors to each stall were open. I didn't need to see that, though, to realize I was the only one in there that night. I worked myself up, but I couldn't calm myself down at all. All I managed to do was make myself feel nervous. I could hear the sound of my breath growing heavier. I quickly got on with what I came there to do. I tried to keep my mind calm. I sure was good at making mountains out of molehills, it seemed. While I was in there, I seemed to be completely alone. It was absolutely silent. I quickly finished up, washed my hands, and ran outside to find my husband waiting out there for me. I ran over to him. The very first thing he said to me was, "It's good you weren't in there alone, huh?" I asked him what he meant. "Well, I only say that because you didn't want to go in there. You said you were scared, so I figured you might have felt a bit more at ease with someone else in there with you." I didn't understand what he was saying. I was alone in the bathroom, wasn't I? My husband noticed that strange look on my face. He said, "What? You know what I mean. As soon as we went into the bathroom, you must have heard those high heels coming in behind you. I mean, if I could hear it in the men's room, you must have heard it too." When my husband said that to me, my blood ran cold. As I've said many times before, I was certain I was the only one in there at the time. No one else came in, and I never heard any footsteps like my husband said. I was at a loss for words. My husband must have seen the confused and frightened look on my face because he stopped talking about the bathroom. In a much more serious tone, he said to get back to the car. He took me by the hand and led me back. Without saying a word, we got back on the road. We spent some time driving in silence, and then we started speaking again. After a few hours, we arrived home in one piece. My husband looked up the roadside station online and found out that at one time in the past, there had been many offerings of flowers and dolls in the bathroom as a kind of memento to commemorate someone's passing. It does make me wonder if I truly was alone in the bathroom that night. I don't know why my husband was able to hear what he heard, and I wasn't. Maybe I'm not so sensitive to spirits. I do remember those terrible feelings of nervousness and anxiety, though. Maybe those feelings were brought on by the presence in the bathroom with me. I don't know. We've never been back to that particular roadside station, despite having the opportunity to do so many times. When I was a little bit younger, I often went out after dinner and stayed out until it was really late at night. I loved playing catch with my friends. We were quite a sporty group back then. We loved to play tossing the baseball back and forth. We even found a secret access point into the schoolyard. It seemed like some other kids had cut a hole into the wire mesh fence that surrounded the schoolyard. When it was dark enough out to not be detected, we would slip in through that hole and go play catch at school. You can play catch in the dark if you're focused enough. Plus, the ball is coming at you at a high speed while your vision is impaired. It adds a thrilling element of danger to the game, and of course a lot of fun as well. It's seriously dangerous though, so don't do that. I can't lie though, I really did enjoy the thrill of it. The night this happened was no different than any other night. We snuck in and were having a good time. After a while though, one of us picked up on a noise that seemed quite unusual. Actually, I think it might have been me who noticed it first. Actually, it sounded like there was a ball bouncing in another part of the schoolyard. We didn't ever play anywhere near the area it was coming from. We played in a place near the hole in the fence, so we could leave immediately if security or the cops came. Of course, we hadn't ever met anyone else there during those times. As I looked in the direction I heard the sound coming from, I saw what looked to me like the vague outline of another kid. This kid looked younger than me and my friends though, just based on the stature. He was far away from us though, so it was difficult to see him clearly. It was about 1 a.m., and we were playing in the high school kids' playground. We had never heard anyone coming or going, and were trying our best to listen out for things like that, so we wouldn't get in trouble for trespassing. It was seriously weird how we hadn't heard this kid at all until that moment. My friends and I were kind of freaking out. This kid was all alone in a place he shouldn't be, and he had gotten in without any of us realizing. He was in a completely dark area too. There were basically no lights at all. The only reason we could see him at all was because of a dim light in the area nearby us. The kid appeared to be playing catch all by himself. He was picking up the ball and throwing it. It would bounce off a nearby tree, then roll back to him. Suddenly, the kid launched the ball in our direction. We watched as it slowly rolled into the light and down by our feet. We were creeped out. The kid didn't say a single word, but the intent was clear as day. He wanted to play with us. Not knowing what to do or how to react, we just stood there in silence, watching as the kid made no attempt to come closer at all. He just stood there in the dark looking back at us, waiting. One of my friends broke the silence, saying, "Let's go home, guys." We agreed with him. This was way too weird, and we didn't want to be there anymore. What kid would be playing alone at 1 a.m., and why did he want us to go into such a dark area with him? We thought we were crazy being out as a group so late. We never expected any company, and certainly not a solitary kid. As we turned our backs to leave, we heard a rush of oncoming footfalls behind us. It sounded like someone was rushing at us, out from the darkness. I was so scared I started running. My panicked friends joined me in the sprinting, and we all scrambled to get out of that hole in the mesh fence. As we turned around, nobody was there anymore. After we escaped, we didn't really ever mess around at the school grounds after hours again. It just didn't feel right. One of my friends said that when we were all rushing to get out of the school area, he had dropped his catcher's mitt. He saw it the very next day, hanging on the top of a tree branch, the very same tree the kid had been throwing the ball at. It was a scary night indeed. My friends think it was a spirit we encountered that night, some lonely soul, maybe someone who had been bullied in life, now seeking friendship in the afterlife. If that's truly the case, then that makes me feel a bit sad that we ran away. However, now that I'm older and a lot more cynical, I wonder if maybe it was actually an adult. The person was so far away, and because we were much smaller and younger back then, we didn't have a full perspective. Maybe we just thought it was a kid. If option 2 is what's true, it's a little more sinister with what he did with that ball. Whoever it was, they were surely trying to entice us into coming out of the light and into the darkness by offering to play with us. I don't know which one is true, but I know that it's a memory that's a pretty damn spooky one.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that little notification bell so you never miss a story. And if you have your own encounter you'd like to share, leave a comment below. Who knows, it might just find its way into a future video. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, the scariest stories are often the ones closest to home.